Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Nature channel. Have you ever seen a plant eat a bug? Not accidentally, not by mistake, on purpose. Right now, somewhere out in the wild, there are plants sitting very still, no legs, no eyes, no teeth, quietly waiting to catch their dinner. And here's the wildest part. They're actually good at it. Really, really good at it. Some of them look like tiny cups filled with liquid, hanging from jungle vines like little lanterns. Some grow leaves covered in sparkly drops that look exactly like dewdrops, but are actually super sticky glue. And some of them have mouths, actual snapping mouths that slam shut the moment a bug steps inside. These are carnivorous plants, and they are possibly the coolest things growing out of the ground anywhere on Earth. They don't live in scary places. They don't chase you. They just sit in quiet, soggy, sunny spots, bogs and moors and rainforests, and let the bugs come to them, which somehow the bugs always do. Tonight, we're going to visit their world. We'll tiptoe through misty Scottish wetlands and steamy jungle floors. We'll meet plants that have been around for 40 million years, long before dinosaurs disappeared, just quietly sitting and waiting and snacking on tiny things. It's strange, it's wonderful, and it's completely 100% real. Get comfy, pull your blanket up, we're going in. There is a place in the world where the soil is pale and thin, almost silvery in the early morning light. The rain falls there often, soft, steady rain that drums quietly on broad leaves and fills the hollows between roots. But this rain, as generous as it seems, carries almost nothing of what a plant needs. No nitrogen, no phosphorus, just water and the faint mineral taste of the earth it passed through. And yet, life found a way. In these hungry places, some of the most extraordinary plants on earth decided to become something other than merely green. You might imagine that a carnivorous plant is a creature of drama and violence. But if you were to sit beside one, really sit quietly, the way you sit beside a slow river, you would see something entirely different. You would see patience. You would see beauty. You would see, in the curve of a pitcher or the velvet of a sticky leaf, the same calm geometry that lives in a seashell or the inside of a flower. These plants are strange, yes, but they are also, in their own way, deeply restful things to look at. The world contains more than 800 species of carnivorous plants. 800 different answers to the same quiet question. How do you survive when the ground gives you nothing? Each answer is its own kind of wonder. Some build traps that snap shut in less than a second. Others build traps that could take weeks to work, slow and patient as a tide. Some grow in tropical rainforests where the air is warm and close and smells of earth and blossoms. Others live in cold mountain bogs where frost comes in October and the wind tastes of ice. All of them, in their own way, have made peace with scarcity and found in that peace a remarkable way to flourish. The oldest known carnivorous plant fossils are about 35 to 40 million years old, which means that long before there were humans to marvel at them, long before the first forests we would recognize today, these plants were already quietly doing what they do, waiting, luring, digesting, moving on. There is something comforting in that kind of deep time. The world has been patient for a very long while. Most carnivorous plants are small. You could cup many of them in your hands. The Venus flytrap, that most famous of all meat-eating plants, rarely grows larger than about 30 centimeters across in the wild. The sundews are often tinier still, some no wider than a coin, their leaves spread flat against wet moss like a dropped necklace. Even the largest pitcher plants, the giants of their kind, are not hulking monsters. They are elegant, long-necked, flushed with green and crimson and cream, hanging from jungle vines like lanterns someone forgot to light. What makes a plant carnivorous exactly? Scientists have a fairly gentle answer to that question. A plant is considered carnivorous when it can attract, capture, and digest animal prey, and then absorb the nutrients from that digestion. It must benefit from the nutrients to count, not just trap things by accident. And it must do this reliably, as a strategy, as something it has evolved to do. Many plants catch insects accidentally on sticky hairs meant for other purposes. But a true carnivorous plant has built its whole body around the possibility of a meal. The prey these plants eat is, for the most part, very small. Insects are the most common meal. Gnats, ants, mosquitoes, small flies, the occasional bee that wandered too close to something that smelled too sweet. Some of the larger pitchers have been known to digest frogs. Some, the truly enormous ones, have occasionally caught small mammals, a rat or a shrew that slipped in and could not climb back out. But these are rarities, the exceptions that make people gasp. Day to day, the life of a carnivorous plant is a quieter affair. A gnat, a fruit fly, a tiny spider picking its way across a glistening leaf. Small lives, small meals, a small and steady sustenance. There is a theory, a beautiful one, about why carnivorous plants evolved their traps rather than simply developing deeper or more efficient roots. The idea is that in the environments where they live, the soil is so poor that deeper roots would find nothing more to eat. There is no secret reservoir of nitrogen waiting underground. The shortage is real all the way down. And so, instead of going deeper, these plants went outward. They reached into the air, into the world of moving things, and found their nutrients there instead. It is a kind of pivot, a turning toward the light of a different kind of abundance. Let your breathing slow a little now. There is no rush here. The plants are not going anywhere. Neither are you. The Venus flytrap is native to only a very small part of the world, a strip of coastal bogs in North and South Carolina in the United States, within about 100 kilometers of Wilmington. That's it. This plant, which has become one of the most recognized living things on Earth, grows wild in a place smaller than many cities. In the wild, it lives in a very specific kind of habitat: wet, nutrient-poor, sunny. Take away any one of those three things, and the Venus flytrap struggles. It needs light to fuel its traps. It needs wet soil to stay alive. And it needs poverty, true soil poverty, to make its carnivorous strategy worthwhile. People have grown Venus flytraps in greenhouses and homes all over the world, of course. They are curious and captivating, and it is understandable that someone would want one on their windowsill. But in the wild, the flytrap is considered vulnerable. Its habitat, those particular bogs, has been drained and developed and burned and disturbed in so many ways that only a fraction of the original population survives. The plant that feels like a piece of science fiction turns out to need something very ordinary to survive: just the quiet, undisturbed, boggy ground it has always known. The trigger mechanism of the Venus flytrap is one of the most studied things in all of plant science. Each lobe of the trap has 3 tiny trigger hairs set in a triangle near the center. When something brushes one of these hairs, the plant starts a kind of countdown. If a second hair is touched within about 20 seconds, the trap snaps shut. This 2-touch system is thought to prevent the plant from wasting energy closing on raindrops or falling leaves. It requires 2 signals, which a living, moving creature is far more likely to provide than a bit of debris. Imagine being the plant in that moment. Something has touched you once. You are waiting. The forest around you is still. The light filters through in pale green columns. And then, a second touch, and the trap in that fraction of a second becomes something entirely different. What was open is now closed. What was an invitation is now a room with no door. The closing of the fly trap is a remarkable feat of plant physics. There is no muscle in a plant, no tendon or nerve. What moves the trap is a sudden change in the curvature of the leaf, driven by water pressure, by a rapid shift of water between cells on the inner and outer surfaces of each lobe. The outer surface expands faster than the inner, and the whole leaf bends, snapping shut like a book dropped on a table. It is one of the fastest movements in the plant kingdom, and it all happens on the inside, invisible, watery, quiet. Once the trap is closed and the plant has confirmed there is something alive inside, it will count further movements, up to 5, before it commits fully to digestion. The lobes press tight. Digestive fluids begin to seep out from glands on the inner surface. The insect, already trapped, already still, slowly dissolves. The plant absorbs what it needs. This process takes 5 to 12 days for most meals. Then the trap reopens, dry and spent and ready again. It will do this perhaps 3 to 5 more times in its life before it is too worn to function, and the leaf simply turns and fades. Somewhere in the world tonight, a Venus flytrap is sitting open in the dark, its lobes spread softly, waiting. The air around it is cool and damp. There are small sounds, water moving somewhere nearby, a frog calling once, and then going silent. The trap does not hurry, it does not worry, it simply waits, the way everything patient and alive has always waited. If you feel comfortable, let your eyes soften. You are here. The night is soft. There is nothing that needs to be solved. There is a place in Scotland, on the wide flat moors, where the wind comes in off the sea, carrying the smell of salt and heather, where a tiny plant grows in the wet peat like a dropped jewel. It is a sundew, Drosera rotundifolia, the round-leaved sundew, and it is barely larger than a 2-pence coin. Its leaves are round and red and fringed with long, slender hairs, and at the tip of each hair sits a single drop of liquid that catches the light in a way that seems, to any small passing creature, like the most generous thing in the world. That drop is not water. It is a sticky, protein-rich glue secreted by glands at the tip of the hair, kept perpetually moist even in dry weather by the plant's own chemistry. When sunlight hits a sundew's leaves, those drops catch the light and scatter it in tiny, brilliant sparks. Rose gold in the morning, amber at midday, silver white in the soft gray of a Scottish afternoon. Charles Darwin, who studied sundews obsessively and wrote a book about carnivorous plants, once said that he cared more about the sundew than about the origin of any and all species. That was probably an exaggeration, but it gives you a sense of how captivating these tiny plants can be. Darwin spent years feeding sundews different things: pieces of meat, fragments of egg white, drops of various solutions, to understand what they could and could not digest. He found that the sundew was remarkably discriminating. It responded strongly to nitrogenous compounds, the chemical signatures of protein, of flesh, of living things. It was largely indifferent to non-nutritious materials. He interpreted this as evidence that the plant possessed a kind of chemical sensitivity, a way of tasting the world without anything we would call a mouth. He was right, and the chemistry behind it took another century to fully understand. The sundew is the most widespread genus of carnivorous plants on Earth. There are over 200 species of Drosera growing on every continent except Antarctica, from the coastal heaths of Australia, where whole hillsides can blush pink and red with their leaves, to the high-altitude grasslands of southern Africa, to the rainforests of Brazil, to those quiet Scottish moors. Each one is its own small variation on the same patient theme: glistening arms, sticky drops, the long, slow wait. When an insect lands on a sundew's leaf, it touches one of those glistening drops and finds that it cannot easily pull free. The more it struggles, the more drops it touches, and the stronger the adhesion becomes. The tentacles, that is the name for the gland-tipped hairs, begin to move, not quickly, not at the speed of a Venus flytrap, but slowly, with great deliberateness, bending inward toward the center of the leaf, wrapping the insect in a gentle, enclosing embrace. This movement can take anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours, depending on the species and the size of the prey. The closing of a sundew around its meal is, if you watch it with patience, one of the most dreamlike things in nature. The red fingers curl inward, one by one, until the insect is enfolded completely, pressed against the leaf's inner surface where the digestive glands are densest. Then comes the digestion, slow, thorough, and complete. What remains after a few days, when the leaf reopens and the tentacles straighten back into their waiting position, is sometimes nothing more than an empty husk, a ghost of the creature that landed there. Some sundews, particularly the tropical species, grow into large and rather spectacular plants. The Cape sundew of South Africa, Drosera capensis, grows long, strap-like leaves that can reach 20 centimeters, each edged with tentacles that are a deep, vivid red. When it catches a large insect like a moth, the whole leaf may fold along its length, curling slowly around the meal like a closing hand. It is slow enough to watch in real time if you're patient, and eerie enough that people who see it for the first time sometimes feel the need to sit down. If you enjoy these stories, a kind comment or a like on the video means so much. It helps others find this quiet little channel, and it warms the evening to know you're here. Thank you. Many sundew species go dormant in winter. In temperate climates, the leaves die back and the plant retreats into a tight resting bud, a hibernaculum, just below the surface of the soil or nestled in the moss. In this state, it looks like nothing at all, like a small brown smudge in the peat. But underground, it is alive, waiting for the warmth and light that will tell it the season has turned. When spring arrives and the days begin to lengthen, new leaves push up, the tentacles uncurl, and the first drops of sticky fluid appear at their tips. The plant has remembered what it is, There is something calming about this rhythm, the going in and the coming out, the seasons of rest and seasons of waiting. The sundew does not resist winter. It does not struggle against the cold or try to keep going when the light is insufficient. It simply rests, and when the time is right, it returns. Some of the world's rarest sundews are almost unbelievably strange. Drosera regia, the king sundew of South Africa, grows leaves up to 70 centimeters long, longer than your arm, fringed with tentacles, and capable of catching fairly large insects. It is also critically endangered, surviving in only 2 small populations in the Cederberg Mountains. In the wild, it grows in stream banks and seeps where cold, clear water runs constantly over white sand. It is a plant that knows exactly where it needs to be and will only live there and nowhere else. Sundews can also propagate vegetatively, growing new plants from pieces of leaf if those pieces fall into suitable ground. This means that in the right habitat, a single plant can slowly spread into a colony, a carpet of red-fringed discs covering a patch of wet peat the size of a dining table. In such a colony, hundreds of individual plants work their quiet, patient work side by side, each one its own small, glistening universe. The light is softer now. The world outside is quieter. If there is a blanket nearby, now might be a good time to pull it a little closer. You are in good company tonight, the most patient company on earth. There is a family of plants that invented a different kind of trap altogether, one that does not snap, does not curl, does not move at all. These are the pitcher plants, and their strategy is ancient and elegant and, if you think about it long enough, almost unbearably clever. A pitcher plant builds a vessel, a modified leaf, rolled and fused into the shape of a jug or a tube or a flute, and fills it with liquid and waits. It does not need to chase. It does not need to grab. It simply creates inside itself the most irresistible possible invitation, and then stands very still. There are 2 main groups of pitcher plants that most people know. One is the genus Sarracenia, native to North America. Tall, elegant tubes of green and red and yellow that stand upright in bogs and seeps, their mouths open to the rain. The other is Nepenthes, the tropical pitcher plants, which grow as vines in the forests of Southeast Asia, dangling their pitchers from tendrils like ornaments on a vine. These 2 groups evolved their pitching strategy completely independently. They are not closely related. They arrived at the same solution through entirely different paths. 2 different journeys to the same beautiful destination. The inside of a Sarracenia pitcher is a quiet, dim, rather beautiful place, if you could shrink yourself small enough to look. The upper portion is lined with nectar-secreting glands, a sweetness that insects smell from some distance away and follow, petal by petal, deeper into the tube. The walls are smooth and slightly waxy in the middle section, so that a climbing insect finds no purchase and slides. Below that, the walls are lined with downward-pointing hairs that make ascending nearly impossible. And, at the very bottom, a pool of liquid, partly rainwater, partly the plant's own digestive secretions, waits with great patience. The process of entering a Sarracenia pitcher is, for most insects, a series of small decisions that each seem reasonable and each lead a little further in. The smell of nectar, the sight of color, the taste of sweetness at the rim. One more step, then another. By the time the insect realizes it cannot go back, The world it came from is a distant brightness above. It tries to fly. The space is too narrow, the light too confusing. Eventually exhausted, it falls into the water below. Some Sarracenia species do not rely on digestion alone. They have recruited bacteria. In the pools at the bottom of the pitcher, communities of microorganisms have evolved to live in this strange, enclosed world, helping to break down the plant's catches in exchange for the shelter and the nutrients the pitcher provides. It is a kind of partnership, the plant and the bacterium, each feeding the other's needs. There are also certain insects, mosquitoes, midges, a particular moth, that have evolved to live inside Sarracenia pitchers without being digested. They have found a way to make a home in what is, for most of their kind, a trap. In a healthy bog in Virginia or the Carolinas, you might find Sarracenia purpurea, the purple pitcher plant, growing in dense colonies, its short, fat pitchers half buried in sphagnum moss, their red-veined hoods arching over the open mouth. Rain falls into these pitchers freely. The hoods do not prevent it. Indeed, rain is part of the design. The pitchers are half filled with rainwater most of the time, and the plant seems to welcome every drop. On a gray autumn day, with the sphagnum moss glowing a deep, wet green around them, those pitchers look like they belong to a different planet entirely, or perhaps to a very old, very quiet part of this one. Do leave a like if you're enjoying this journey, and feel free to check the Sleepy Nature playlist. There are many more quiet evenings waiting there for you. Nepenthes, the tropical pitchers, are something else again, more flamboyant, more varied, more astonishing in the range of their forms. There are more than 170 species, and they grow across a vast range from Madagascar to Australia, concentrated most heavily in Borneo, the Philippines, and Sumatra. They are vines, most of them, their leaves modified into long tendrils that end, when conditions are right, in a pitcher that hangs in midair, swaying gently with every breath of forest wind. The pitchers of Nepenthes come in colors that seem almost too beautiful to be functional. Deep red, vivid green, creamy white, with red veins, speckled like birds' eggs, striped like tropical fish. They can be small and narrow, like test tubes, or large and barrel-shaped, wide enough to hold a liter of liquid. Some have lids, modified structures that arch over the pitcher mouth, that produce their own nectar and help direct visiting insects toward the opening. Some have a waxy, frictionless zone around the rim that sends even large, confident insects sliding straight in. There are Nepenthes that do not feed primarily on insects. High in the mountains of Borneo, Nepenthes loei has evolved a remarkable partnership with tree shrews. The animal comes to eat the nectar from the pitcher's lid. While it feeds, it defecates into the pitcher below. The pitcher absorbs the nutrients from the droppings. The tree shrew gets the nectar. Neither one harms the other. It is a deal struck in the forest over millions of years without a single word. The mountain of Kinabalu in Borneo is one of the richest places for Nepenthes on Earth. More than a dozen species grow there at different elevations, in different habitats, each one shaped by the particular pressures of its own altitude and light and soil. Walk up the mountain slowly, as you would walk anywhere worth going, and you pass through layer after layer of pitcher plant territory. The air grows cooler and mistier. The pitchers grow paler and more delicate. Near the summit, in the cold cloud forest, you find Nepenthes raja, the largest pitcher plant in the world. Nepenthes raja produces pitchers that can hold up to 3.5 liters of digestive fluid. They are large enough, in theory, to contain a small rat. They have in fact been documented catching rats, occasionally in the wild, along with the more usual diet of insects and tree shrew droppings. But more commonly, they too benefit from the attention of animals. Rats and other small mammals visit the pitchers to drink the nectar from the lid, and in the process contribute their own small donations to the pool below. The plant seems to have made peace with the idea that not all visitors need to be guests. Let your body settle a little more into wherever you are right now. If your jaw is holding any tension, you might let it soften. The world tonight is patient and still. There is a place in the bogs of northeastern North America where the sphagnum moss grows so thick and so deep that walking across it feels like walking on a mattress. Soft, yielding, bouncing gently underfoot. The water beneath is dark with tannins, the color of a strong tea, stained by the slow breakdown of centuries of plant matter. Nothing much decays quickly here. The acidity of the water slows everything down, preserves everything. There are bogs in Europe where ancient humans, people from the Bronze Age, from the Iron Age, have been found preserved in the peat, their skin leather brown, their expressions almost peaceful. The bog holds things. It keeps things. It does not let go easily. In these bogs, Sarracenia purpurea is often one of the most common plants. It colors the moss in autumn, its pitchers turning deep red-purple, almost wine-colored when the cold arrives. Beside it, sundews, Drosera rotundifolia in the north, Drosera intermedia at slightly wetter edges, spread their red rosettes across the open moss, catching the flat autumn light. And here and there, if you look carefully at the water's surface in shallow pools, you might see something that seems at first like a fine green lace floating just below the surface, and realize after a moment that it is alive. This is utricularia, the bladderwort, and it may be the most ingenious trap in the entire carnivorous plant kingdom. Bladderworts have no roots. They float freely in the water or trail through wet soil, their thread-like stems branching endlessly into a lace-like network of filaments. Along these filaments, at intervals, grow tiny hollow sacs, the bladders, each one a fraction of a millimeter to a few millimeters across, depending on the species. Each bladder is a sealed vacuum chamber. It has pumped water out of its interior, creating a slight negative pressure. And on one side, it has a door, a trapdoor, held shut by that negative pressure, fringed with sensitive trigger hairs. When something small enough, a water flea, a tiny worm, a microscopic crustacean, an algal cell, brushes those trigger hairs, the trapdoor opens. For an instant, far less than a millisecond, faster than a blink, faster than a thought, the water outside rushes in to equalize the pressure, carrying the prey with it. The door snaps shut. The prey is inside. The whole sequence takes perhaps 10 microseconds. It is the fastest movement in the plant kingdom, possibly one of the fastest movements anywhere in nature. The bladderwort digests its catch with enzymes secreted into the bladder's interior, then pumps the water back out and resets the trap, usually within about 15 to 30 minutes. A single plant may carry hundreds of these bladders. They work continuously, day and night, catching tiny things in the dark of the water, resetting and waiting and catching again, quietly, efficiently, without rest. The plant above the water might be blooming. Utricularia have lovely flowers, bright yellow or purple, held on slender stems above the surface, while below, this constant, invisible, rapid-fire hunting goes on. There are more than 230 species of Utricularia, making it the most species-rich genus of carnivorous plants on Earth. They grow in water, in wet soil, in the wet sand of tropical beaches, in the water-filled leaf axils of bromeliads high in South American rainforest canopies. Some are aquatic, some are semi-terrestrial. A few are epiphytic, growing in trees. They have colonized almost every wet habitat on Earth, and in each one, they perform the same basic miracle. The smallest, fastest trap in the plant world, invisible and constant and endlessly patient. If you have been watching for a while and enjoying the journey, your support means the world. A like or a comment below tells me you are here, and that is a lovely thing to know. The flowers of Utricularia are, for such a deadly and industrious plant, surprisingly cheerful. The common bladderwort of Europe and North America, Utricularia vulgaris, has small yellow flowers shaped like tiny snapdragons, held a few centimeters above the water's surface on slender green stems. In summer, a pond edge can be bright with dozens of them, yellow as butter, nodding in the breeze. Whoever passes by and sees them might not think to look beneath the surface, where all that quiet, lightning-fast predation is taking place. Now let yourself breathe out slowly. There is water nearby in your imagination. Still, dark, tea brown, with yellow flowers nodding at its edge. You are sitting on the bank. The moss is cool under your hands. The air smells of peat and late summer. Some bladderworts have been found in habitats that seem almost impossibly marginal, growing in the thin film of water that coats wet rocks on tropical mountainsides, or in the tiny pools of water that collect in the bases of mosses on cloud forest trees. In these extreme places, the bladders may be so small that they catch only bacteria and single-celled organisms, the microscopic plankton of the wet world. The plant has scaled its trap to fit the available prey, and in doing so, has made itself at home in places where almost nothing else can survive. There is a kind of wisdom in that kind of adaptability, in the willingness to work with what is there, rather than waiting for what might be. Let us go somewhere warm now. Let us go to the tropics, to the mountains of Borneo, or the highlands of Sumatra, or the cloud forests of the Philippines, where the mist rolls in from the sea each afternoon, and the trees are covered in moss, and the air is so full of moisture it feels like breathing in a greenhouse. This is the world of the most spectacular carnivorous plants on Earth, and also, strangely, one of the most peaceful places to imagine. The cloud forest is a quiet world. The mist muffles sound. The undergrowth is dense but not tangled. Every plant has found its niche, its patch of filtered light, its foothold in the wet bark of a tree or the crumbling face of a mossy cliff. The Nepenthes vines climb slowly upward, their tendrils reaching from node to node, their pitchers hanging in the dimness like lanterns someone left unlit. Water drips steadily from every surface. The light is green and soft and seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. Nepenthes villosa grows on the slopes of Mount Kinabalu in this kind of light, at elevations above 2,000 meters, where the temperature at night can drop close to freezing. Its pitchers are extraordinary, fringed with a deeply ridged, toothed peristome, the rim that runs around the pitcher's mouth. In most nepenthes, the peristome is smooth and waxy and serves to send insects sliding inward. In N. villosa, it is dramatically ribbed, almost like the gills of a mushroom or the ridges of an elaborate piece of architecture. The function is the same. Insects crawl along the ribs to lick the nectar secreted there and eventually lose their footing. But the form is so elaborate that it seems to go beyond function into something like beauty. There is no agreed answer to why some nepenthes peristomes are so ornate. It may be that the elaboration helps in some mechanical way, directing the insect more effectively, or making the fall more certain. It may be that it helps in some chemical way, more surface area for nectar, or it may simply be one of those extravagances that evolution sometimes produces in isolated, specialized populations where there is no strong pressure toward simplicity. On a remote mountain with very little competition and a reliable food source, a plant might have the luxury of becoming ornate, of becoming, in some sense, beautiful. The pitcher of Nepenthes bicalcarata, the fanged pitcher plant of Borneo, is something else. At the base of its lid, two sharp, curved structures project downward like a pair of fangs, spines of unknown precise function, though various theories have been proposed. But this is not the most unusual thing about this plant. What is most remarkable is its relationship with a particular species of ant, Camponotus schmidtsi, a small, silvery ant that lives exclusively inside the pitchers of Bicalcarata. These ants are swimmers. They dive into the pitcher's digestive fluid to retrieve large prey items, prey that the pitcher alone could not efficiently digest. In doing so, they consume some of the nutrients themselves and also keep the pitcher clean and functional. The plant, in return, provides the ants with a safe, enclosed place to nest, inside the hollow tendril that connects the pitcher to the vine, and feeds them with nectar from the pitcher's lid. It is one of the more intricate living arrangements on Earth, worked out between a plant and an insect over millions of years, in the quiet heart of a Borneo forest. Let yourself relax your hands now, if they're holding anything. Open your palms gently, the way you open a book you love. The night is slow. There are some nepenthes that have given up insect catching almost entirely. Nepenthes ampullaria grows on the forest floor in Borneo and Sumatra, and its pitchers are unusual in that they face upward and lack the prominent lid typical of most species. These pitchers function primarily as leaf litter collectors, catching the dead leaves and other organic debris that falls from the trees above rather than insects. The plant has effectively moved from carnivory to a kind of detritivory, feeding on falling forest debris rather than living prey. It is still using a pitcher, but it has redirected its trap toward a different kind of abundance. What this tells us is that these traps are not fixed, rigid things. They are shapes that life has carved out over time, and they can be carved differently, pointed in new directions, repurposed when circumstances change. The pitcher is a tool, and like any tool, it can serve more than one use if a clever enough hand picks it up. The highlands of Sumatra hold some of the rarest nepenthes on Earth. Many grow in only a single valley, on only a single ridge, in only one specific elevation band, where the light and moisture and soil happen to combine in the exact way that species requires. Some have been known to science for fewer than 20 years. Some, surely, have not been named yet. There are still botanists making first ascents in Sumatran cloud forest and returning with specimens that represent species no one has ever described. The inventory of the carnivorous plant world is not yet complete. The forest is still keeping some of its secrets. The mist is coming in now in our imagining of this place. The forest dims slightly. A hornbill calls once, far away, and then falls silent. The nepenthes pitchers sway a little in the air that moves with the mist. Everything is still and cool and green. In the American Southeast, in the wetlands of the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, there grows a plant that many people consider the most beautiful of all carnivorous species. It is Sarracenia leucophylla, the white-top pitcher plant, and its upper pitchers are flushed with white and crimson and dark green in a pattern so intricate and perfect it looks like something a glass blower made on an inspired afternoon. The white section at the top of the pitcher, the portion closest to the opening, is translucent and marked with deep red veins that branch and rebranch like the veins in a leaf or the tributaries of a river seen from above. Light passes through this white section, and from inside the pitcher, this creates the impression of a bright, glowing window. Insects that have fallen into the liquid below are thought to orient toward light, toward brightness, toward the exit, and so they fly upward toward those glowing white windows. But the windows are solid. There is no exit. The insect circles and falls back and circles again, expending what little energy it has left, until finally it falls into the liquid and does not rise. It is a cruel deception if you think of it from the insect's perspective. But the plant does not know this is cruel. It simply builds the most effective trap its evolution has found, and the trap is beautiful, and the trap works. The beauty and the function are inseparable. This is not unusual in nature. The autumn color of Sarracenia leucophylla is spectacular. As the days shorten and the temperature drops, the white top's pitchers deepen in color. The reds intensify, the white sections brighten, and the whole colony, standing in the golden grass of a wet savanna, glows like stained glass. This is not useful to the plant. Most insects are gone by autumn, and the pitchers will die back before winter. It is simply what the plant does, the way a maple turns red or a ginkgo turns yellow, a response to the chemistry of cooling and shortening days, translated into color. Please do check the Sleepy Nature playlist if you'd like more evenings like this one. There are stories about forests, oceans, mountains, and many other gentle places waiting there for you. Sarracenia flava, the yellow pitcher plant, is another coastal plain species, tall, upright, with pitchers that can reach 90 centimeters in height, green shading to golden yellow with a red throat. It is one of the largest Sarracenia species. In a healthy colony, standing among them feels a little like standing in a very quiet, very ordered garden. The pitchers rising evenly around you, each one slightly different in its coloring, all of them catching the morning light. Sarracenia citatina, the parrot pitcher plant, is the most unusual of the genus. Its pitchers are not upright, but lie along the ground, their hooded openings facing sideways, their interior lined with transparent windows and downward-pointing hairs. It has been called a lobster pot trap. Prey enters through the opening following the light of the windows, but the downward hairs make reversing nearly impossible. This species also catches aquatic prey, small aquatic invertebrates, even tadpoles, when its pitchers flood during heavy rains. It is the only Sarracenia that works both as a land and a water trap. All the Sarracenia species are native to North America and grow nowhere else in the wild. All are to varying degrees threatened, most by the drainage and development of the wetland habitats they require. The longleaf pine savanna ecosystem that supports most of them, that fire-dependent, open-canopied, extraordinarily biodiverse ecosystem, has been reduced to about 3% of its historical extent. In those remaining 3%, a greater concentration of plant diversity exists than almost anywhere else in the temperate world. The pitcher plants grow there in community with hundreds of species of orchids, lilies, grasses, sedges, and wildflowers that together make a kind of botanical wonder that is disappearing faster than most people realize. But tonight, let us not think of the disappearing. Let us think of what remains, of the colonies still standing in the morning light, of the pitchers still opening in April, still catching their first spring insects, still filling with rain, still beginning the slow, patient cycle they have been running for millions of years. Let the thought of that time settle over you like a blanket. All those millions of quiet mornings, all those pitchers catching the light. There is a plant in the Americas, or rather, a large and diverse group of plants, that catches its prey without any moving parts at all and without any liquid traps. It catches with stickiness alone, and it does this more gently, more artfully, and in more different ways than almost any other carnivorous plant group. These are the butterworts and the flypaper sundews, but also, and most distinctly, the pinguicula, the butterworts themselves. Pinguicula are small, low-growing plants with flat, tongue-like leaves that lie pressed against the ground or against rocky surfaces in a rosette. The leaves are yellow-green or lime-green, and they glisten in good light with a fine layer of mucilage secreted by glands covering the entire upper surface. From a distance, they look like fat, satisfied little plants, content in their moss or their limestone crevice. Up close, you can see that the surface is not quite smooth. It is stippled, almost like the skin of a pear, each dot of texture a tiny gland producing its small contribution to the sticky whole. Insects that land on the leaf find themselves lightly caught, not dramatically, not the way a sundew grabs, but subtly, a little, enough to hold them while the leaf slowly secretes additional enzymes and absorbs what it needs. The leaf edge may roll slightly inward when a large catch is made, increasing the contact area. But mostly the butterwort is subtle. It does not make a fuss. It simply catches what it catches and carries on. There is something very restful about the pinguicula aesthetic. They do not reach or curl or snap. They simply lie there, flat and glistening, and let the world come to them. Of all the carnivorous plants, they seem the most at ease with their own strategy, the most settled in their existence. Pinguicula vulgaris, the common butterwort, grows across a wide range of the northern hemisphere, from the mountains of Scandinavia and the Scottish Highlands to the Rockies and the Alps. It favors wet, rocky habitats, cliff faces, stream banks, the edges of waterfalls where the rock is always damp. In such places, it can cover entire surfaces with its flat rosettes. And in early summer, it produces small, delicate flowers, violet purple, shaped like tiny orchids, on slender upright stems. The flowers are pollinated by insects. The leaves below are catching insects. The plant manages both relationships, pollinator and prey, simultaneously, presumably distinguishing one from the other by some combination of timing and positioning that we don't yet fully understand. In Mexico and Central America, Pinguicula diversifies spectacularly. There are Mexican butterworts with leaves that are almost iridescent, flushed with pink and purple and silver. Some are large enough to be grown as ornamental plants. Their cascading rosettes displayed in hanging pots, their flowers lavender or white or rich cerise. The carnivory is almost incidental in their appearance. They look like exotic succulents, like something you would find in a high-end plant shop. They are, underneath their beauty, patient and efficient hunters. Your breathing may have slowed by now. That is perfectly natural. The body, given permission to rest, remembers how. Some Pinguicula species live in extremely arid habitats, dry Mexican mountains where summer brings rain, but winter is long and dry. These species have evolved two distinct leaf forms: carnivorous leaves in summer when moisture is available and insects are plentiful, and tight, compact, succulent-like leaves in winter when the plant retreats into a near dormancy, conserving water, waiting for the rains to return. The same plant, two completely different faces, two different seasons of being. Pinguicula moranensis, a Mexican species with vivid pink-purple flowers, has been found to supplement its carnivorous diet with pollen grains. These grains blow onto the leaf surface, stick in the mucilage, and are absorbed just like any other organic material. The plant does not distinguish between a gnat and a grain of pollen. Both are nitrogen, both are protein, both are absorbed. This promiscuity of appetite is, in some ways, the most efficient strategy of all. The butterwort's name comes from an old folk belief, still widespread in parts of Scandinavia and the Alps, that if you rubbed the leaf onto the teats of a cow, it would prevent the milk from being stolen by fairies. The plant's sticky, slightly glistening leaf surface must have seemed to a medieval farmer in a mountain village like something charged with magic. They were not entirely wrong. There is something remarkable about it, even now. In the highlands of Western Australia, where the soil is ancient and pale and the air is full of eucalyptus and the distances are vast and quiet, there grows a plant so unlike anything else in the carnivorous world that when it was first described scientifically in the 1980s, it caused a considerable stir. This is Cephalotus follicularis, the Albany pitcher plant, and it belongs to a genus and family entirely its own, related to no other carnivorous plant group in the world. Cephalotus is small, growing close to the ground in peaty wetlands near Albany in southwestern Australia. It produces two kinds of leaves: flat, ordinary-looking leaves that function as normal photosynthetic surfaces, and pitcher leaves, small, rounded, lid-bearing pitchers no larger than a 50-cent piece, sitting on the ground in the moss like tiny decorated cups. These pitchers are a rich brown red on the outside, patterned with lighter veins, their lids arched and transparent and frilled at the edges. they look like something a very precise, very patient craftsperson made by hand, out of leather. Inside the pitcher of cephalotus, the mechanism is similar to serexenia, a zone of nectar glands at the top, a frictionless waxy zone below, a pool of digestive fluid at the bottom. The lid, with its translucent windows, may serve a similar function to the white windows of Sarracenia leucophylla, creating a false light that keeps trapped insects disoriented. But cephalotus evolved this solution completely independently in Australia, separated from Sarracenia in North America by the width of an ocean and roughly 40 million years of separate evolution. The same answer arrived at separately in different bodies, in different hemispheres. Scientists call this convergent evolution, the phenomenon by which unrelated organisms evolve similar structures or strategies in response to similar pressures. It happens over and over in the carnivorous plant world. Pitchers evolved at least 4 separate times in 4 different plant families on multiple continents. Sticky traps evolved multiple times. Snap traps evolved twice, in the Venus flytrap and in the water wheel plant, to which we will come. The same problems produce the same solutions again and again across deep time. There is something comforting in that, a kind of logic underlying all the diversity, a deep grammar of adaptation that everything alive seems to speak. If you're finding these stories restful, a like means so much to this small channel. And if you want to drift off with more stories like this one, the Sleepy Nature playlist is always there for you. Cephalotus grows in a very specific habitat, the winter wet, summer dry, peaty heathlands near the southern coast of Western Australia, within a fairly small geographic range. It is not found anywhere else. Like so many carnivorous plants, it is a specialist, built for one particular kind of world, thriving in that world, and largely unable to exist outside it. This is not a weakness. It is a form of perfect fit. The plant and its place, shaped to each other over millions of years, each one the other's definition of home. The flowers of cephalotus are tiny and white, and rather unremarkable compared to the extraordinary pitchers. They appear on long stems in summer, delicate and minimal. The plant is doing its main work elsewhere, in the pitchers and in the flat leaves. The flowers are almost an afterthought, a seasonal duty fulfilled as simply as possible. In cultivation, because cephalotus has become a favorite among carnivorous plant collectors, it can be surprisingly difficult to grow well. It needs cool winters, warm summers, the right kind of light and moisture and soil. It is not a forgiving plant when its conditions are wrong, but when all the elements are right, when the grower has understood what this plant needs and provided it. Cephalotus responds magnificently, building a cluster of pitchers that are, in their small and precise way, as beautiful as anything the plant kingdom offers. Let your thoughts settle now. There is no need to hold anything tightly. Even the most demanding and particular plant, in the right conditions, rests. There is one more snap trap in the world of carnivorous plants, besides the Venus flytrap, and it grows in ponds and slow-moving streams across Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia, and possibly North America, though its presence there has been debated. This is Aldrovanda vesiculosa, the water wheel plant, and it is the most elusive, most widespread, and in some ways most mysterious of all the snaptrap carnivores. The water wheel plant is aquatic and rootless, like a bladderwort. It floats in water, its stems bearing whorls of traps arranged like the spokes of a wheel. Hence the name. Each trap is similar in mechanism to the Venus flytrap. 2 lobes, trigger hairs, a rapid snap when those hairs are touched. But the traps of Aldrovanda are tiny, only a few millimeters across, and they catch correspondingly small prey. Water fleas, mosquito larvae, small aquatic worms, occasionally small tadpoles. The speed of Aldrovanda's trap closure is comparable to that of the Venus flytrap, a few hundredths of a second. For a rootless aquatic plant floating in open water, building a mechanism this fast and this precise is a remarkable investment. It suggests that the nutrient payoff, even from prey as small as a water flea, is worth the significant physiological cost of building and operating a snap trap. Aldrovanda has a strange, fragmented distribution, isolated populations in Europe, scattered records across Asia and Africa, occasional records in Australia. It requires very specific water chemistry: soft, slightly acidic, nutrient-poor water, warm in summer, with adequate light. The same kind of nutrient poverty that drives carnivory on land apparently drives it in water too. Where the water is rich in dissolved nutrients, Aldrovanda cannot compete with faster-growing plants and disappears. Where the water is poor, it thrives. Many Aldrovanda populations have declined or vanished in the 20th century as water quality changed, as agricultural runoff added nutrients to formerly oligotrophic lakes, as wetlands were drained, as the specific conditions the plant requires became harder to find. There are conservation efforts underway in several European countries to reintroduce Aldrovanda to suitable habitats, with some success. Watching a population reestablish itself in a restored wetland, the wheeled stems multiplying slowly through the clear water, the tiny traps snapping in the warm stillness of a summer afternoon, is apparently a rather moving thing to witness. The breath in, the breath out, the slow wheel of the water wheel plant in still water, everything turning quietly, in its own time. The relationship between Aldrovanda and the Venus flytrap is one of the more surprising revelations of recent genetic research. They are closely related, both members of the family Droseraceae, which also includes the sundews. This means that their snap traps are not two completely independent inventions, but are descended from a common ancestral mechanism. Perhaps a slower, less precise snap, or a very rapid folding movement that existed in the common ancestor of both plants and was refined separately into the lightning-fast traps they each now possess. The snap, in other words, is very old. It was invented once and then improved twice in 2 different directions. Some populations of Aldrovanda in Japan and Korea have been studied carefully enough that researchers have been able to watch the plant complete its entire annual cycle, growing rapidly in spring, building large colonies by midsummer, producing tiny white flowers in late summer, producing seeds, and then, as autumn arrives, forming dormant winter buds called turions that sink to the bottom of the pond. In spring, those turions rise again and begin to grow. It is a cycle of remarkable precision and reliability, repeated year after year in the same ponds, in the same soft, clear water. Those turions sinking in autumn, hard little packages of compressed potential, sealed against the cold. resting in the mud, are a beautiful thing to think about. Somewhere below the surface of a quiet European pond tonight, there are Aldrovanda turions in the mud, waiting for spring. They are not afraid of the winter. They have done this before. They know, in whatever way a plant can know anything, that warmth will come. Let us think about the soil tonight, specifically the absence of it. The places where carnivorous plants live best are the places where the soil has been stripped of almost everything. The white sands of the North Carolina coastal plain, the deep peat of a Scottish bog, the black waterlogged mud of a Borneo forest floor, the limestone cliffs of a Mexican mountain. These are places of scarcity, and yet, because of the scarcity, because the competition from other, more nutrient-hungry plants is lower, they become refugees, sanctuaries in their own strange way, places where the specialists can thrive precisely because the generalists cannot. Carnivorous plants are, in the language of ecology, stress tolerators. They have evolved strategies not to compete aggressively for resources, but to survive and even thrive under conditions of chronic stress. Low nutrients, often low light from the canopy of normal plant competition, often waterlogged conditions that limit root function. Other plants, given similar conditions, simply cannot function. Carnivorous plants have found a way around the limitation, and in doing so have claimed those difficult habitats as their own. The sphagnum moss that carpets most bog habitats is itself a remarkable organism, not a carnivorous plant, but a crucial partner in creating the conditions carnivorous plants need. Sphagnum actively acidifies its environment, releasing hydrogen ions as it grows, lowering the pH of the water around it to levels hostile to many bacteria and fungi. This acidity slows decomposition, which is why bogs accumulate peat, dead plant matter that doesn't rot, and the acidified, nutrient-poor water that results is precisely what most carnivorous bog plants require. The sphagnum creates the environment. The carnivorous plants move in. You might find it calming to picture this world. The bog on a still August evening, the sky a soft orange and blue above, the sphagnum moss a quilt of green and gold, and rust beneath your feet. The air smells of something old and clean. There is no wind. The sundews catch the last light and scatter it in small, individual sparks. The pitcher plants stand in their clusters, their mouths open to the cooling air. From somewhere across the bog, a curlew calls once, that long, bubbling, descending note that seems to carry all the space of an open moor inside it, and then falls silent. This is where they live. This is what home smells and sounds like for a carnivorous plant. If you'd like to leave a comment below, even just a hello, it genuinely brightens the evening to know you're here. Thank you for being part of this. The relationship between fire and carnivorous plant habitats is a fascinating one. Many of the ecosystems where carnivorous plants thrive, longleaf pine savannas, certain Australian heathlands, some Californian wetlands, are fire-adapted ecosystems that historically burned regularly, every few years, sometimes more often. Fire kept the tree canopy open, prevented the accumulation of non-carnivorous vegetation that would shade out the sun-loving carnivorous plants, and cycled nutrients through the ecosystem in ways that ultimately kept the soil in the impoverished state the carnivores required. When fire was suppressed, as it was across most of these habitats through the 20th century. The canopy closed. Trees and shrubs invaded. The grasses and sedges that supported the ecosystem's understory species shaded out. The carnivorous plants, needing light, needing open space, needing that particular kind of poverty, declined. In many places, they declined to near extinction at a local level. Restoration efforts now sometimes involve reintroducing fire, carefully managed burns that open the canopy, set back the succession, and give the slow-growing, long-lived carnivorous species a chance to recolonize. There is something quietly moving about watching a bog or a savanna recover after a managed burn. The first spring after fire, the ground is black and gray, and it seems like nothing could grow there. Then the sedges push up, then the grasses, then, low and cautious at first, the rosettes of sundews reappear, and then the first small pitchers of serratia. And eventually, if the site is healthy, the whole community reassembles itself from whatever underground reserve of roots and rhizomes and seeds survived the fire. The plants know what to do. They have done it many times before. The tropical highlands of Venezuela and Guyana hold one of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth. The tepuis, those flat-topped sandstone mountains that rise abruptly from the surrounding forest like enormous ships run aground. Their tops are wet and cold and swept by cloud, covered in a kind of vegetation found nowhere else on Earth. And on their flanks and summits, several remarkable carnivorous plants have made their home. Heliamphora, the marsh pitcher plants, grow on tepui summits and in the surrounding high-altitude wetlands. They are thought to be among the most primitive of all pitcher plants, possibly representing something close to the ancestral state from which other pitcher plant lineages evolved. Their pitchers are simpler than those of serratia or nepenthes, essentially a rolled leaf with the edges fused, topped not with a true lid, but with a small spoon-shaped structure called a nectar spoon, which secretes a drop of nectar to attract insects. The pitcher has no waxy zone. Prey that falls in tends to stay in partly because of the shape, partly because of the water that accumulates, and partly because the bacterial broth in the pitcher makes climbing back out difficult. Heliamphora relies more heavily on bacteria for digestion than most other carnivorous plants. It secretes very little in the way of its own digestive enzymes. Instead, the microbial communities that live in the pitcher do much of the biochemical work, and the plant absorbs what the bacteria release. It is a more cooperative, less self-sufficient trap than most. A collaboration between plant and microbe in a cold, wet, cloud-swept place where growing conditions are hard enough that any division of labor makes sense. The tepuis are one of the oldest exposed landscapes on Earth. The sandstone they are made of was laid down perhaps 1.7 billion years ago, and the mountains have been isolated islands of habitat for tens of millions of years, generating an extraordinary degree of endemic species. Every tepui has its own slightly different community of organisms, plants, insects, frogs, mosses, that evolved in isolation from their neighbors on the next tepui, separated by the lowland forest below as effectively as if by an ocean. Heliamphora has speciated prolifically across the tepuis. There are more than 20 described species, each one associated with particular mountains or ranges, each one slightly different in the shape of its pitcher, the size of its nectar spoon the color of its leaves. Some are small and delicate. Some are large, producing pitchers 30 centimeters tall, flushed with deep red and coppery orange. They stand in the mist on the mountaintop, surrounded by bromeliad-like plants and white quartz sand and tiny orchids, and the whole scene has a quality of unreality, as if you had stepped onto a stage set designed by someone who had never quite believed in the conventions of normal landscape. Let your body be heavy now. Let the warmth beneath you hold you completely. There is nothing you need to lift. The flowers of helianthera are white and nodding, borne on stems that rise above the pitchers in spring. They are simple flowers, no elaborate lip or spur, no complex structure to entice a specific pollinator. They are open, uncomplicated, trusting. The wind carries their pollen. They do not negotiate. There is a tradition among botanists and plant enthusiasts of making expeditions to Tepui summits to study and photograph the plants there. These are not easy journeys. The mountains are remote, the access difficult, the weather frequently severe. But those who make them describe the experience in terms that are consistently awed and quietly reverent. The plants on the summit are like nothing anywhere else. The light, filtered through cloud, is even and soft and extraordinary. The silence is almost complete. It is, by all accounts, a place that changes the way you think about what the world is and how large and various and extraordinary it has been all along, without your knowing. There is a small, delicate plant that grows in ponds and streams and quiet, boggy pools across much of the northern hemisphere, and it looks, at first glance, like a piece of green lace floating just at the surface of the water. This is Aldrovanda's cousin in appearance, if not in mechanism. An aquatic sundew of sorts, floating free in still water, its leaves modified into flat rosettes that lie on the surface and bear sticky, glittering tentacles just like those of the land-dwelling sundews. But this is not Aldrovanda. This is something different. A moment of convergence again, a place where two different plant lineages arrived at similar shapes through different evolutionary journeys. The world of water is full of these convergences, these overlapping strategies, these separate inventions of the same basic plan. Let us think tonight about the water, specifically about still water, about ponds in late July, when the light is long and golden and comes in at a low angle across the surface. The water is warm near the top and cooler deeper down, and if you put your hand in and moved it slowly, you could feel the layers. The surface is where the most life is. Insects skating across, beetles rowing through, the occasional frog floating with just its eyes above the waterline. And just below the surface, in the top few centimeters of clear, warm water, things like Aldrovanda find their home. Still water is a whole world. People who spend time in and around it, the kind of careful, patient people who sit by ponds for hours with a notebook and a hand lens, describe discovering that every square centimeter of the surface is occupied by something. A raft of water striders crossing like skaters on a rink, a diving beetle descending, trailing a silver bubble of air behind it, a caddis fly larva dragging its tiny house of sand grains and broken leaf across the bottom. And somewhere among all of this, so small as to be nearly invisible, the traps of Utricularia doing their work, snapping shut, resetting, snapping shut again, in the still and warm and golden water, Carnivorous plants are often good indicators of ecosystem health. Their presence tells you something about the water or the soil, that it has not been over-enriched by agricultural runoff, that it has retained the particular chemistry of an older, less disturbed world. When a carnivorous plant disappears from a pond or a bog, it is often one of the first signals that something has changed in the water chemistry. The plant has narrower tolerances than most, and it responds first. This makes them, in the language of ecology, indicator species, living sensors of environmental health, useful precisely because of their sensitivity. The absence of a carnivorous plant where one formerly grew can tell a careful observer more about the state of a wetland than a battery of chemical tests. The plant has been taking readings all along. There are people who have dedicated their lives to the conservation and study of these plants, who have spent decades crawling through bogs and wading through streams and cataloging populations and tracking their decline and working to protect what remains. These are not famous people mostly. They publish in specialist journals and give talks at small botanical conferences and tend their own collections with a devotion that borders on the devotional in a religious sense. They know the plants the way you know a person, not just the facts, but the character, the particular quality of each one's presence. The playlist has many more stories if you need a longer night. Just search for the Sleepy Nature channel, and you'll find them all gathered there. One such person was Mary Gibson Henry, an American botanist of the early 20th century who spent decades exploring the flora of the American Southeast and discovering new plant species. She was one of the first people to locate and document wild populations of some of the rarer Sarracenia species, driving alone through the backroads of Georgia and Alabama and the Carolinas with her field equipment in the back of a car, looking for bogs, stopping wherever the roadside vegetation looked right. Her discoveries helped establish the scientific foundation for later conservation efforts, and her field notes, detailed, precise, and full of a quiet joy in the found and the seen, remain useful to researchers today. There is something lovely about that kind of dedication, the long patient search, the decades of quiet attention. It is, in its own way, a form of being carnivorous, a slow, patient, thoroughgoing capture of knowledge, absorbed over time, used to sustain something that matters. There are places in the world where carnivorous plants grow in such abundance that the landscape itself seems to take on their color and quality, where a hillside or a lakeside or a bog surface becomes, in season, a kind of living tapestry of red and green and gold, all of it glittering with trapped light, all of it waiting. In the southwestern corner of Western Australia, that ancient, flat, fire-prone landscape of white sand and banksia and eucalyptus, sundews grow in such numbers that in spring, the ground between the heath shrubs can be almost entirely covered with their rosettes. Drosera is represented by more species in southwestern Australia than anywhere else on Earth. Over 100 species, many of them found nowhere else, each one a slightly different solution to the sticky trap problem. Some are climbing. They produce twining stems that wind through the heath vegetation, carrying sticky leaves at intervals like scattered little suns. Some are tuberous. They die back each summer to a small underground tuber, surviving the hot, dry months in compressed dormant form, emerging again with the autumn rains. The tuberous sundews of Australia are particularly extraordinary. Drosera peltata, one of the more widespread climbing species, produces a single erect stem that can reach 30 centimeters, bearing leaves that are round and flat and arranged in a spiral up the stem, each one covered in vivid red tentacles. In early spring, before the heat comes, a hillside covered in deep peltata glimmers as if someone had scattered thousands of tiny, glistening ornaments across the understory. By summer, the plant is gone, retreated underground to its tuber, waiting in the cool dark for the rains to return. The tuber strategy is one of several ways carnivorous plants deal with the problem of seasonality, the annual return of conditions too hot or too cold or too dry for active growth. The Venus flytrap goes partially dormant in winter, its leaves dying back to the rhizome. The sundews of temperate regions form hibernacula. The tuberous sundews disappear entirely underground. The pinguicula of Mexican mountains switch to their non-carnivorous succulent form. Each one has found its own way to wait out the difficult season, to fold inward, to save what matters, to rest until the world is ready again. There is, in all of this, something deeply instructive, not as a metaphor. This is not that kind of story, but simply as a fact worth knowing, that the capacity to rest, to become less, to retreat into one's own small core and wait, this is not weakness. It is one of the most successful strategies in the history of life. The plants that survive the longest in the most difficult places are often the ones that have learned most thoroughly how to wait. Let yourself be in that rest right now. Let the thinking slow. Let the words become shapes rather than meanings, sounds rather than sentences. The story is still here. You don't have to hold it. Drosera regia, the king sundew of the Cedarburg Mountains in South Africa, that giant among sundews with its 70-centimeter tentacle-edged leaves, grows in a habitat so specific that it has never been successfully introduced anywhere else in the wild. It grows in a single valley system, in stream banks where cold water runs constantly through white gravel at the precise elevation where the winter is cool but not freezing and the summer is warm but not hot. Move it 2 kilometers to the north or south, up the slope or down, and it fails. This extreme specificity is not unusual in carnivorous plants. It is, rather, their characteristic quality, the thing they share most broadly, the trait that unites the Venus flytrap of North Carolina and the aldrovanda of a single Polish lake, and the nepenthes of a single Borneo ridge, and the cephalotus of a single stretch of Western Australian coastal heath. They are all specialists, all fitted to a particular, narrow, specific world, all making the most of exactly the place they are in, and all, in their particular places, beautiful. The world of carnivorous plants has a long literary and cultural history, one that says a great deal about the human imagination and its tendency to project both fear and wonder onto things that are strange and beautiful. H.G. Wells wrote a short story called The Flowering of the Strange Orchid in 1894, in which a collector purchases an unknown orchid that turns out to have tentacle-like aerial roots that attempt to anesthetize and feed from its owner. It was one of many Victorian-era stories and newspaper reports about killer plants. Plants that ate men, plants that held victims fast, plants that lurked in the jungle waiting for the unwary. These stories were almost entirely fictional, but they fed on a genuine fact that there really were plants that ate animals, and that those plants were, once you knew about them, impossible to dismiss from the imagination. The reality, as we have wandered through it tonight, is so much gentler than the imagining. A Venus flytrap cannot hurt you. A Nepenthes pitcher, even the giant Raja, would struggle to digest anything much larger than a shrew. Sundews catch gnats. Bladderworts catch water fleas. The carnivorous plant world is a world of small, patient, beautiful things going quietly about their business in the wet, nutrient-poor margins of the world. It is not a world of danger. It is, if anything, a world of extraordinary peacefulness. There is a pleasure in knowing this, in exchanging the dramatic, imagined version for the quiet, real one. The real thing is stranger, in some ways, than the invented thing. A plant that vacuums in water flees at 10 microseconds. A plant that keeps a colony of ants as partners inside its pitchers. A plant that catches tree shrew droppings and calls it dinner. A plant that has been waiting in the same bog for longer than the oldest tree you have ever seen. These are not frightening. They are astonishing. They are precisely the kind of thing that makes the world feel at night like an enormous and generous mystery. If you'd like to share this story with someone who might enjoy it, or leave a comment about your favorite plant from tonight, I would love to hear. And the playlist is full of more nights like this one, whenever you need them. The people who study and grow carnivorous plants tend, in my observation, to be a particular kind of person, careful, patient, detail-oriented, capable of sustained attention to small things. They are the kind of people who notice the light changing on a pond at dusk and stay to watch. They are the kind of people who stop at the edge of a bog rather than walking through it, because they want to see what is there before they disturb it. They are, in the best sense, the kind of people who pay attention. Paying attention is what carnivory requires of a plant. A Venus flytrap pays attention to the touch of 2 trigger hairs in sequence. A sundew pays attention to the struggling of an insect caught in its glue. A bladderwort pays attention to the brushing of hairs in the dark of the water. Each one is a kind of sensitivity, an opening toward the world, a willingness to respond to what arrives. You might say that caring about carnivorous plants requires a similar kind of attention. The plants are small, their traps are often tiny, their habitats are quiet and unglamorous. To appreciate them fully, you have to be willing to get close, to look carefully, to stay for a while. And in doing so, in slowing down enough to actually see what you are looking at, you find that the world opens up in ways you did not expect. The bog becomes not a featureless flat place, but a community of extraordinary specificity. The glistening drop on a sundew's tentacle becomes not just moisture, but a trap of almost incomprehensible elegance. The slow curl of a leaf around an insect becomes not just a plant movement, but a conversation between the living and the dead and the endlessly cycling. Let the world tonight be that large. Let it hold all of these things, the bog and the trap and the slow curl and the waiting, and let it hold you too. The night has come fully now in our imagining. The bog is dark. The pitcher plants have folded their shadows into the sphagnum. The sundews, glistening in moonlight, are still and perfect and waiting. Somewhere in the water, A bladderwort's traps are snapping once every few minutes in the complete and total dark. No one sees it. It does not need to be seen. It simply does what it does, as it has always done, as it will go on doing long after this night is over. There is a kind of comfort in the persistence of things. These plants were here before us. They will, in all likelihood, be here after us, in some form, in some adapted version, catching whatever it is that the future's small creatures look like. They have survived ice ages and droughts and shifting continents and the coming and going of the animals that once shared their landscapes, and the arrival of humans and the changes humans have brought. They are small, and they are specific, and they are, in their own quiet way, enduring. The oldest known living Venus flytrap individual, tracked by scientists in the wild, was estimated to be over 20 years old. Nepenthes vines have been known to live for decades, some perhaps for over a century, slowly climbing their forest trees and producing pitchers year after year in the same stretch of cloud forest. Sundews in undisturbed bogs may grow and reproduce and die and regrow from seed in the same patch of sphagnum for thousands of years. Not the same individual, but the same line, the same genetic ancestry, the same quiet presence in the same wet corner of the world. That continuity is a real thing. It exists. It is happening right now, tonight, in bogs and forests and ponds and on mountain ridges all over the world, invisible and silent and enormously patient. The world is full of this kind of continuity, this slow, steady persistence of life in its specific places. And most of it goes unnoticed by most people most of the time. That is not a problem. The plants do not require our notice. But when we do notice, when we slow down enough to see, something shifts. The world gets larger. The night gets softer. The strange and beautiful fact of being alive becomes something you can rest inside rather than something you have to explain. You have spent this evening with some of the strangest and most beautiful plants on earth. You have visited bogs in North Carolina and cloud forests in Borneo and tepui summits in Venezuela and moors in Scotland and heathlands in Western Australia. You have learned something about patience, the patience of a plant that waits weeks for a single insect, the patience of a plant that retreats underground for 6 months and trusts that spring will come, the patience of a plant that has been refining its trap for 40 million years and is in no hurry to stop. That patience is a gift if you will take it, not as something to be copied or performed, but as something to remember. Somewhere in the world right now, a sundew is glistening in moonlight, its tentacles spread wide, each one tipped with a drop that catches the cold stars. A pitcher plant stands open to the night air, its insect-rich depths still and quiet. A bladderwort floats in dark water, its 100 tiny traps set and waiting. None of them is anxious. None of them is hurrying. All of them are simply here in their place, alive in the dark, doing what they have always done. And you are here too, in your place, in your dark, in the warmth and softness of wherever you are resting. You have been patient tonight. You have followed the story all the way to the end of the bog and back again. Now, let the images soften, the pictures, the sundews, the slow curl of a closing leaf. Let them become light and color rather than form, a warmth rather than a picture. Let the sound of this story become like the sound of rain on a bog, steady, soft, without particular meaning, just presence. You are safe. You are warm. The world is still. The plants are patient. Let yourself go to sleep. Thank you so much for spending this evening with the Sleepy Nature Channel. If you drifted off partway through, that's the highest compliment. A like, a comment, or a moment in the playlist means the world. Sleep well.